Okay, so picture this. It's the end of the month. You just got paid. Like, you literally watch the notification pop up on your phone. And somehow, by the time you sit down and actually look at your account, it's already mostly gone. And you're just sitting there going, where did it go? What did I even buy? You scroll through your transactions and it's like, oh, coffee here, a random online order there, some subscription you forgot you even had, a dinner out, another dinner out. And none of it individually feels like a big deal. But together? Together it apparently ate your entire paycheck. And the frustrating part, the part that nobody really talks about, is that you're not being reckless. You're not buying yachts. You're not gambling. You're just living. And yet it feels like you're constantly treading water, like no matter how much you earn, there's never quite enough left over to actually do something with it. That feeling, that quiet, low-grade financial anxiety that just kind of hums in the background of your life, that's what got me obsessed with all of this. My name is Sam, and honestly, I spend probably an embarrassing amount of time thinking about money, the psychology behind it, and why some people seem to genuinely understand how wealth works, while the rest of us were handed a calculator in school and told that was enough. Spoiler, it was not enough. And here's the thing. This isn't about being bad with money. Most of us aren't bad with money because we're irresponsible. We're bad with money because nobody ever actually taught us. Like, think about it. 13 plus years of formal education, and most people couldn't tell you the difference between an asset and a liability, what compound interest actually means for their life, or why working harder doesn't automatically make you wealthier. We learned the mitochondria is the powerhouse of the cell, but we didn't learn how not to be broke. So today, that's what we're going to fix. Or at least, start to fix. Because by the time we're done here, I want you to look at money differently. Not as this stressful, confusing thing that happens to you, but as something you can actually understand, and therefore, actually control. Let's get into it. The biggest lie we were told about money. So the first thing we need to address, and this is one that's going to sting a little, is the idea that if you just work hard enough, money will take care of itself. Get good grades, get a good job, work hard, and you'll be fine. That was the script, right? That was the promise. And for a lot of people, they did everything right. They got the degree, they got the job. They worked hard, got the promotions, got the raises, and they're still somehow stressed about money. Not because they failed at the system, but because the system was never actually designed to explain wealth building to them. Here's a concept that Robert Kiyosaki talked about in Rich Dad, Poor Dad. Though honestly, once you hear it, you'll start seeing it everywhere. And that's the difference between working for money versus having money work for you. Most of us are trained from birth to be employees. We learn to trade time for money. You work, you get paid. You stop working, you stop getting paid. And there's nothing inherently wrong with that. Someone has to do the work. But if it's the only thing you're doing, you're essentially stuck on a treadmill. The people who build real wealth aren't necessarily working harder than you, they're working differently. They're building systems, assets, and income streams that generate money even when they're asleep. And I know that sounds like something you'd read on a motivational poster, but stick with me because it's actually just math. Think about it this way. Imagine two people. Person A earns $50,000 a year, saves almost nothing, but feels like they're living comfortably. Person B also earns $50,000 a year, but consistently sets aside 20%, $10,000, every single year, and puts it somewhere it can grow. Over 30 years, Person A has a great job history and very little to show for it financially. Person B, because of the miracle of compound interest, could be sitting on well over $1 million, depending on where that money was invested. Same income, completely different outcome. The difference isn't talent. It isn't luck. It's financial literacy. What compound interest actually is and why it's life-changing. Okay, so speaking of compound interest, let's actually talk about this because I feel like most people have heard the term, nodded along politely, and then never really let it sink in. Compound interest is basically interest on interest. That's it. Simple definition. But the implications of it are wild. Here's the classic example. If you invest $10,000 at an average annual return of 7%, after 1 year you have $10,700. Fine, not exciting. But here's where it gets interesting. In year 2, you're not earning 7% on 10,000. You're earning 7% on 10,700. And then year 3, it's on top of that. And the longer it runs, the faster it grows because the base keeps getting bigger. Over 40 years, without adding a single extra dollar, that $10,000 becomes roughly $149,000. You did nothing. You just waited. Now imagine if you were adding money regularly. This is why financial advisors never stop talking about starting early. It's not a cliche, it's math. A 22-year-old who invests a modest amount each month will, in almost every scenario, retire wealthier than a 40-year-old who invests twice as much per month, simply because of the additional time compound interest had to work. The cruel irony is that schools teach us history and literature starting at age 5, but they don't teach us this until, well, honestly, most schools never really teach it properly. And by the time people figure it out, they've often already lost a decade or more of their most valuable compounding years. I remember the first time someone actually walked me through this with real numbers, and I just sat there feeling this mix of amazement and mild grief. Like, why did no one tell me this when I was 18? The difference between assets and liabilities, the one that changes everything. Alright, so this is the one that I think is genuinely the most important concept in personal finance. And it's so simple that once you hear it, you're going to wonder why it wasn't taught in school on day one. An asset is something that puts money in your pocket. A liability is something that takes money out of your pocket. That's it. That's the whole concept. Now, apply that to some common things people think of as wealth. Your car, for most people, is a liability. It costs you insurance, maintenance, fuel, depreciation. It takes money out of your pocket every single month. Your house, and I know this is controversial, is often closer to a liability than an asset for the person living in it because of mortgage interest, property taxes, maintenance costs, and the fact that it doesn't generate income. A rental property that earns more than it costs? Asset. A stock that pays dividends? Asset. A business that generates revenue without requiring your constant presence? Massive asset. The reason this matters so much is because most people, when they start earning more money, instinctively spend it on more liabilities. Bigger car, bigger house, more subscriptions, more stuff. And this is actually a phenomenon that has a name: lifestyle inflation. Your income goes up, your spending goes up proportionally, and your actual financial progress stays flat. Wealthy people, and I mean genuinely wealthy, not just high income, tend to do something counterintuitive. When their income increases, they funnel the extra money into assets before they upgrade their lifestyle. They build the machine first, and then they let the machine fund the lifestyle. It sounds almost too simple, doesn't it? But go look at the balance sheets of the wealthiest people in the world. What do you see? Assets, equity, ownership stakes, revenue-generating things. Not just big salaries, systems. Why budgeting feels so hard, and why you're probably doing it wrong. Can we talk about budgeting for a second? Because I think budgeting gets a really unfair reputation. People hear the word and immediately feel a kind of financial guilt almost. Like, budgeting means you're bad with money, or you're broke, or you have to stop doing fun things. And that's genuinely backwards. The most financially successful people I've studied budget obsessively. Not because they're poor, but because they know exactly where their money is going, and that knowledge is what keeps them wealthy. The problem with how most people approach budgeting is that it's reactive. You wait until the end of the month, look at your spending with a kind of quiet horror, and try to do better next month. That's not a budget. That's a financial autopsy. A real budget is proactive. You decide at the beginning of the month where your money is going before it goes anywhere. You assign every dollar a job. This is sometimes called a zero-based budget. Not because you're trying to have $0, but because every dollar is allocated to something, whether that's rent, food, savings, investments, or fund money. You're in control. The money doesn't just drift. One framework that's become really popular, and honestly, it's a good starting point, is the 50-30-20 rule. 50% of your after-tax income goes to needs, rent, food, utilities, transportation. 30% goes to wants, entertainment, eating out, hobbies. 20% goes to savings and investments. Now, is that perfectly applicable to everyone's life? No. If you live somewhere with insane rent prices, that 50% for needs might not cut it. But it's a useful framework to pressure test where you currently are. Like, try running your actual numbers through it and see which category is blowing up. Most people are shocked by their wants spending. And here's the other thing about budgeting that nobody tells you. It needs to be forgiving. The reason most people abandon budgets isn't because they're undisciplined. It's because they build a budget so rigid that one unexpected expense blows the whole thing up, and they give up entirely. Build in a buffer. Expect the unexpected. A budget that accommodates real life is infinitely better than a perfect budget that you abandon after 3 weeks. Debt, the slow drain most people ignore. Okay, debt. Deep breath. This one's uncomfortable, but we have to go here. Debt is, in many ways, the opposite of compound interest. Where compound interest quietly grows your wealth over time, high-interest debt quietly destroys it. And the math is just as unforgiving. The average credit card interest rate is somewhere between 20 and 25% annually in many countries. So if you're carrying a balance of $5,000 on a credit card at 20% interest, and you're only paying the minimum each month, you're not really paying off that debt. You're mostly paying interest. The actual balance barely moves. It's like trying to empty a bathtub while the tap is running. Now, not all debt is bad. This is an important distinction. A mortgage on a property that appreciates in value, or better yet, generates rental income, can be a tool for building wealth. A student loan that leads to a significantly higher paying career can be a worthwhile investment. Even a business loan, used intelligently, can create assets worth far more than the original debt. But consumer debt, credit cards, buy now, pay later schemes, personal loans used to fund lifestyle expenses, that's almost always a wealth drain. And the sneaky part is how normalized it's become. We live in a culture that basically runs on credit. It's been completely normalized to carry a credit card balance, to finance a car you can't quite afford, to use debt to fund a lifestyle that your income doesn't actually support. If you're in debt right now, I want to say this clearly. You're not irresponsible or broken. The entire financial services industry is quite literally designed to keep you in debt. Minimum payment structures, promotional interest rates that spike after a few months, loyalty programs that make you feel rewarded for spending, it's all engineered. Knowing that doesn't make the debt disappear, but it does mean you're not fighting a personal failing, you're fighting a system. The most effective debt repayment strategy, and there's real psychological research behind this, is the debt snowball method. Pay off your smallest debts first, regardless of interest rate. Why? Because every time you eliminate a debt, you get a genuine psychological win. And that win motivates you to keep going. Pure mathematically, you'd attack high-interest debt first. That's the debt avalanche. But humans aren't pure math machines, and momentum matters. The emergency fund, the most boring, most important thing. I want to spend a moment on something that sounds incredibly unsexy, but is, genuinely, the single most stabilizing financial move most people can make: the emergency fund. Basically, an emergency fund is 3 to 6 months' worth of living expenses sitting in a liquid, accessible account, not invested in the market, not locked away, just there. Boring. Waiting. And here's why it matters so much. Life is going to throw you curveballs. Your car is going to need repairs. You might lose your job. A health expense will come out of nowhere. Something will happen. And when it does, there are 2 types of people: those who have an emergency fund and those who go into debt. Without an emergency fund, a single unexpected expense becomes a financial crisis. You put it on a credit card, you pay interest. It takes months to pay off, And meanwhile, your financial progress basically resets. With an emergency fund, the same event is just an inconvenience. You handle it, you rebuild the fund, and you move on. There's also a psychological element here that I find really fascinating. When you have a financial cushion, your relationship with money changes. You make better decisions. You're less likely to stay in a bad job out of desperation. You're less likely to make panic-driven financial choices. Money anxiety, and I felt this personally, is cognitively exhausting. It actually reduces your ability to think clearly. Having a buffer removes that constant background stress, and the knock-on effects for your decision-making are significant. Understanding investing without the jargon. Okay, so let's talk about investing. And I promise to actually explain this in a way that doesn't make you want to fall asleep. Investing, at its most fundamental level, is putting your money to work so it can grow over time. Instead of your money just sitting in a checking account losing purchasing power to inflation, you're deploying it somewhere it can generate returns. Now, there are lots of ways to invest: stocks, real estate, bonds, mutual funds, index funds, starting a business, and people get into heated debates about which is best. But for most regular people who are just starting out, the most accessible and historically reliable option is index funds. An index fund is basically a basket of stocks that mirrors a market index, like the S&P 500, which tracks the 500 largest publicly traded companies in the United States. When you invest in an S&P 500 index fund, you're essentially betting that the broad American economy will be worth more in 30 years than it is today. Historically, the answer has been yes, pretty reliably. The beauty of index funds is that they don't require you to be a genius stock picker. You don't have to know which individual company is going to win. You just own a little bit of everything, and you let the overall market grow over time. Fees are typically very low, diversification is built in, and the historical average return is around 7 to 10% annually over long periods. Now, the market goes up and down, sometimes dramatically, and that's where people panic and make mistakes. They see their portfolio drop 20% in a market downturn, and they sell everything, locking in their losses. But historically, the people who stay invested through downturns are the ones who come out ahead. Time in the market consistently beats trying to time the market. The key principle here is called dollar cost averaging. Instead of trying to invest a lump sum at exactly the right moment, you invest a fixed amount every month, regardless of what the market is doing. When prices are low, your fixed amount buys more. When prices are high, it buys less. Over time, it averages out, and it completely removes the stress of trying to figure out the perfect moment to invest. Your income is not your wealth. This one trips people up constantly. The idea that how much you earn and how wealthy you are is the same thing. They're not, at all. There are people earning $200,000 a year who are effectively broke. High expenses, debt, no savings, no investments. And there are people earning $40,000 a year who are quietly, steadily building real wealth because they live below their means and invest consistently. Your wealth is what you have left after everything is paid. It's your net worth, the difference between your assets and your liabilities. And that number can be totally disconnected from your income. The concept of living below your means sounds like deprivation, like you're supposed to be miserable and not enjoy life. But that's not really what it means. It means building a lifestyle that costs less than you earn, so you have surplus to direct toward wealth building. It doesn't mean never going to dinner or never buying things you enjoy. It means being intentional about which things actually bring you genuine value and cutting the stuff that doesn't. This is where something called hedonic adaptation becomes really important to understand. Hedonic adaptation is the psychological phenomenon where, no matter what you acquire or achieve, you eventually return to a baseline level of happiness. That new car that thrilled you for 3 months, now it's just your car. That new apartment that felt luxurious, now it's just home. We adapt, almost always, to whatever our circumstances are. This means that upgrading your lifestyle rarely produces lasting happiness. It just raises your normal. And every time you raise your normal, your financial survival depends on maintaining that level. You're essentially building yourself a more expensive cage. The people who are most financially free tend to be people who figured out how to genuinely enjoy life without constantly escalating their costs, not because they're suppressing themselves, but because they found real joy in things that don't require a credit card. Taxes, the thing you must understand. I know, nobody wants to talk about taxes. But here's the thing, not understanding taxes is one of the most expensive mistakes you can make, and it's entirely preventable. Most employees look at their paycheck, see the tax withheld, and just kind of accept it as the cost of living. But wealthy people, business owners, investors, people with complex financial situations, spend significant time and resources legally minimizing their tax burden. And the tools to do that aren't secret, they're just not taught. For example, retirement accounts. In many countries, contributing to a retirement account, like a 401k or IRA in the United States, or their equivalents elsewhere, allows you to either defer taxes to retirement or pay taxes now and grow your money tax-free. Either way, you're getting a significant advantage over just keeping money in a regular account. Understanding the difference between your marginal tax rate and your effective tax rate matters too. Your marginal rate is what you pay on the last dollar you earn, which is what people usually mean when they say, "I'm in the 30% tax bracket." Your effective rate is what you actually pay as a percentage of your total income, which is almost always much lower, because the tax system is progressive. And then there are deductions, credits, and all sorts of other levers that, depending on your situation, can meaningfully reduce what you owe. I'm not saying become a tax attorney, but I am saying, at minimum, know your options. Talk to a tax professional if you can. The amount of money people leave on the table every year just by not knowing the rules is genuinely staggering. The mindset shift that ties it all together. We've covered a lot. Compound interest, assets versus liabilities, budgeting, debt, emergency funds, investing, income versus wealth, taxes. That's a lot. But I want to end the body of this with something that isn't a strategy or a framework. It's more of a shift in how you think. Money is a tool. That's it. It's a tool, like a hammer. And just like a hammer, what matters isn't just having it, it's knowing how to use it. A hammer in the hands of someone who doesn't know what they're doing can make a mess. But in the hands of someone skilled, it builds something real. The reason financial literacy matters isn't about becoming obsessed with money or making it the central point of your life. It's the opposite, actually. People who understand money don't have to think about it constantly. They've built systems that run in the background, savings that auto-transfer, investments that auto-contribute, a budget that accounts for real life. And that frees up mental bandwidth to think about the things that actually matter to them. Financial security isn't the destination, it's the foundation. It's what lets you take career risks. It's what lets you be generous. It's what lets you spend time with people you love without the background hum of financial anxiety draining your energy. And most importantly, it gives you choices. That's what money really buys at the highest level. Not things, not status, choices. This isn't the end, it's the beginning. So here we are, and I want to be honest with you for a second. Everything we talked about today, compound interest, assets versus liabilities, budgeting, eliminating debt, building an emergency fund, investing in index funds, understanding taxes, untangling your income from your wealth, none of it is magic. None of it is secret. The information exists. It has always existed. And yet, most people go their entire lives without really internalizing it. And I think about that, and it's a little heartbreaking, honestly. Because the gap between people who thrive financially and people who struggle isn't usually intelligence or work ethic. It's information. It's access to the right ideas at the right time. It's someone sitting you down, cutting through the jargon, and just explaining how this stuff works. That's all I ever wanted to do here. If you walked away from this knowing one thing, just one, I'd want it to be this. The best time to start was yesterday. The second best time is today. You don't need to earn more money to start building wealth. You don't need to be a finance expert. You don't need a perfect plan. You need a good enough plan and the discipline to start before you feel completely ready. Because that moment of total readiness never really comes. Start small if you need to. Open a savings account if you don't have one. Set up an automatic transfer of even $20 a month. Read one book about personal finance. Take one step. And then take another. The version of you that never got taught this stuff wasn't lazy or irresponsible. They were just never handed the right map. Well, now you have one. Where you go from here is up to you. Thanks for sticking around for all of this, genuinely. If it helped even a little, share it with someone who needs it. Because the best thing about financial literacy is that it's contagious in the best possible way. And I'll see you in the next one.